Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into one single event, a flashpoint in Venezuela that pretty much tore up the old rulebook on geopolitics. And what it revealed is a brand new and frankly much more dangerous global chessboard. So it all kicked off on January 3rd, 2026, with this really dramatic military operation that just caught the entire world off guard. I mean, we're talking U.S. Special Forces launching a lightning raid right into the heart of Caracas. And the speed? It was just staggering. In a matter of hours, the U.S. military had basically toppled a sovereign government right in its own hemisphere. You can see on this timeline, within a day, President Maduro was in U.S. custody. And then, by January 5th, the White House drops this bombshell announcement that they would, and I'm quoting here, run the country. This wasn't just some raid. This was full-on regime change. And the justification for all this, well, it came fast and it was blunt. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, he really didn't mince words. He framed it as a reassertion of American dominance. This is basically a 21st century version of the Monroe Doctrine, a policy that's shaped U.S. foreign policy for, well, centuries. The message couldn't be clearer. This is our backyard, and we make the rules here. But toppling a leader is one thing. What happens the day after, right? As we're about to see, the immediate aftermath, it was anything but stable. I mean, this was the question on everyone's lips. The U.S. plan, or maybe the lack of a plan, created this massive power vacuum. It left everyone, from Venezuelans on the ground to the international community, just scratching their heads and asking, who is actually in charge now? So instead of some smooth, clean transition, what you got was, well, chaos. In this totally baffling move, the U.S. installs Maduro's own former vice president as the interim leader. This completely alienated the pro-democracy opposition they said they were there to support. And what does that do? It throws control over Venezuela's huge oil assets into total turmoil. On the streets, pro-Maduro militias started attacking civilians. Meanwhile, back home in the U.S., public opinion was just completely split down the middle. Right, but here's the thing. This crisis, it was never just about Venezuela. This was a direct challenge aimed at China, a global superpower that has been quietly and very effectively building up its influence in a place the U.S. has always considered its own backyard. And China's response? It was swift and it was sharp. Foreign Minister Wang Yi's statement wasn't just some diplomatic boilerplate. It was a declaration that the days of unchallenged U.S. dominance in the region were over. And look, this confrontation, it's been brewing for decades, really, all fueled by China's incredible economic rise. Yeah, to really get why China feels so confident, you just have to follow the money. Look at this number, $518 billion. That's how much trade China did with Latin America in 2024. Alone. That's a record high, and it's a huge sign of just how deeply tied the region's economies are to Beijing. And it's not just about trade. Check this out. Chinese financial institutions have pumped over $300 billion in loans into the region since the year 2000. That is way more than what U.S. institutions have provided, and it gives Beijing this enormous financial leverage and influence. Okay, now this is what's really fascinating. You can actually see how both superpowers lay out their competing visions in their own official documents, using this really carefully chosen language. So the U.S. strategy, it warns about, quote, non-hemispheric competitors and their low-cost foreign assistance, wink wink. Meanwhile, China's policy paper promises to oppose hegemonism and unilateral bullying. They're not actually naming each other, but come on, it's a total diplomatic shadowboxing match, and we all know exactly who's in the ring. So this confrontation in Venezuela, it immediately forced the rest of the world to pick a side. And what it revealed was a planet that is starkly divided along these new geopolitical fault lines. Russia, for its part, was quick to condemn the whole thing as an act of armed aggression. But, some analysts believe the Kremlin is actually seeing a strategic advantage here. The U.S. doing this basically gives them diplomatic cover to justify their own, let's say, disregard for international law, especially in places like Ukraine. And the European Union's response? Well, it was, pretty predictably, a lot more cautious. They said they were closely monitoring the situation. Now, this statement got absolutely roasted on social media, with critics pointing out that monitoring has kind of become the EU's go-to and often totally ineffective response to major world events.
China, on the other hand, just seized the opportunity to position itself as the voice of reason. Wang Yi's statement that no country should act as a world policeman was a direct shot at the US. It fits perfectly into Beijing's long-running story that America is this overbearing unilateral power.
And you have to understand this aggressive new posture, it wasn't just a one-off. Analysts pretty quickly came up with a name for it, the Donneau Doctrine. And the idea is that the US believes it can act completely unconstrained by norms, by alliances, by international law, as long as it's in its own hemisphere. And this wasn't just a theory. They started putting it into practice right away. Yeah, the Donroe Doctrine was put into action almost immediately. The administration renewed its frankly shocking desire to take over Greenland. They threatened the leader of Colombia, a major partner, and they reiterated this wish for military strikes inside Mexico. I mean, these moves sent shockwaves all across the hemisphere. It put even close allies on notice and signaled this radical, really unpredictable shift in U.S. foreign policy. But look, this conflict goes so much deeper than just military force and economic pressure. At its very core, it's a battle of ideas. It's a fundamental clash over which system, which model of governance, really offers a better future for the world. So that brings us to the critical question, right? Beyond the guns and the geopolitics, whose story is more persuasive? Who is winning the hearts and minds of the world? Well, some recent research has revealed a really surprising and fascinating divergence in how the US and China are making their case to everybody else. And this slide just captures the two competing narratives perfectly. On one side, you have American state media selling its ideals, civil liberties, diversity, freedom of speech. On the other side, you have China, and they're selling their results, economic growth, social stability, competent leadership. It's basically a global smackdown between American values and Chinese performance. And here's the really stunning part. According to a major study across 19 countries, the Chinese message, it's working. In a controlled experiment, just exposing people around the world to Chinese state media was enough to actually shift their preference away from the US model and toward the Chinese model. And get this effect is strongest in the very places where this new Cold War is being fought, in Africa and in Latin America. This shows that China's focus on competence and economic growth is finding a really receptive audience in the developing world, right in that backyard where this whole story started. So, what does this all mean? Where does this leave us? The military operation in Venezuela itself, that was over in just a few days. But the conflict it ignited, that has just begun. This is a clash of empires, a showdown between two totally competing visions for the future. That single flashpoint in Caracas has laid bare the central conflict of our time. And the question isn't who wins the next battle, but whose story is going to end up shaping the 21st century.